and welcome to Big Deal. And today on the sidelines of ISB's annual conference, Artha, I have with me Mr. Nikhil Shah, who's the MD of Alvarez Marsal here in India. Nikhil, so good to have you on CNBC TV 18. Of course, as far as the whole LCLT process is concerned, we have seen many twists and turns. It has been a learning curve for all of you, us included as well. But at this point, when we have seen some resolutions, some big cases being solved also by the Supreme Court in this particular case, which are landmark cases, how do you rate the success of the whole process as we stand today?
I think if you look at the overall objectives of the IBC, which is to really drive better financial recovery for creditors and other stakeholders in the process, prior to the IBC, we had estimated recovery rates of about 25 cents on exposure, and the process would take roughly between 4 and 5 years to complete. Now, with the operationalization of the IBC over the last 2 years, we have a number of data points actually that are indicating from the first 12 cases, or the large 12 cases, that estimated recovery should be around 40 to 45 cents. And the process is taking, on average, about a year to complete. So I think that that's a very significant improvement from what it was earlier. And more importantly that, I think that there's been a significant mindset shift in terms of how borrowers are behaving and how lenders are behaving as a result of the new system.
So there are many impacts and, of course, many things that will really pan out because of the NCLT process. But at the moment, as an RP, the role of RP, how have you ranked that? How has that come across? Because there were many questions being raised earlier. Have the challenges lessened as we moved along with the entire process? And what has been your experience on that front?
So, A&M, the firm that I work with, is the global leader in restructuring and turnaround, both prior to bankruptcy and companies that are in bankruptcy. So we have a lot of experience from around the world to work in these situations. And so for us, the experience was new in the sense of the Indian insolvency code, but in terms of what was required under the code in terms of running the operations and cash flow of the companies and compliance, running a sale process to get the best resolution plans in, and then all of the bankruptcy administration work from claims management to avoidance and preferential transaction analysis. Those are all activities that we do in other parts of the world and have been doing in India now with this. So from our perspective, it was the newness of the Indian system that we had to contend with, and the new ecosystem that exists with the NCLT and the judges and the NCLAT, etc. But from our perspective, it's been a great run, and there's been significant learnings on our part as well.
One very critical aspect of the entire IBC process is also the due diligence bit when it comes to the buyers in particular, because it's an already stressed asset. And what is in it is something which is of material use to somebody who wants to bet on it while the lenders want to get rid of it. How has that been played a crucial role, and what has been your experience there? What are the aspects that you really watch out for while doing that entire exercise?
So if we're working with a buyer of assets, of a distressed asset through an insolvency proceeding, we will have a large team that will spend time on in terms of looking at all of the information made available by the resolution professional of the corporate debtor in the proceedings.
That's where my question also comes, because in a lot of cases the promoter is not keen on getting this particular asset sold. In an event like that, how do you trust the data that has been given? There's usually a third party that has been nominated as insolvency professional, which in India has been firms like A&M or the big four accounting firms, or a bunch of more high quality kind of service providers. And so the expectation is that those service providers will do a very deep job in terms of providing information so that a buyer can not have any uncertainty when they're bidding on the asset. And that should be something that should be an objective of the insolvency professional to do through the process. Having said that, we have had experiences where they have not been able to provide that, due to issues caused by perhaps incumbent promoters or uncertainness about what their support, what the expectation of what the buyers would want. These are some of the challenges that we face. Yeah.
Okay. What are the other challenges that come across?
I think that because the system is new, there are a lot of legal interpretation challenges that exist as to whether, for example, certain tax liabilities can be done away with through this process.
Right.
There's been, and on a nearly every month or every other month, there's some new change that's occurring through a regulation, either through the
Yes.
IBBI or through the government changing through an ordinance or changing the law. So there's been very significant changes that have been taking place, and actually keeping abreast of all of those changes and implementing those in the ongoing cases makes it difficult to do while you have a running case
Right.
that's going on.
So you think there are enough buyers in the market, there is enough interest apart, because the first 12 were the really good assets. Some of the steel assets are the ones which have been really taken in, especially also because steel cycle is going through a good phase. But what about the list that is coming in?
My view is that there's actually a lot of investor interest in buying distressed assets at this time. There's actually billions of dollars that are coming into India with this particular strategy of acquiring companies. I personally am in touch with about 20 or 25 different strategic and financial investors that have either have set up shop already here in India to buy these assets or are in the process of doing so. And so I expect that there will be buyers for these assets in terms of the pipeline of cases coming.
And what about some of those assets which do not want to go through the IBC route and the NCLT route? Is there a huge pipeline of those deals also developing at this point?
Yes, I think there's been a mindset shift from borrowers where they've realized that if their cash flows are starting to deteriorate, or they're not able to, they can see that they won't be able to service their obligations, that they are starting much earlier to take preventive action, which includes trying to refinance their debt or recapitalize by raising some equity, or by diluting their positions, or essentially by selling non-core assets or selling parts of their business as well to kind of address the problem. And lastly, actually attacking, improving their operating cash flows as well. And so we're starting to see borrowers, companies, promoters starting to think very deeply about actually doing this in advance so that they don't go down an insolvency track.
And finally, about the valuations, there was a lot of mismatch in what the aspirants were presenting earlier to then what was expected, and then there were various rounds, and then we have evolved. How does the valuation dynamic stack up at this point?
I think that people perceive value based on a number of factors. The first factor, if you ask me, is about what operational cash flow, what EBITDA that business generates and has consistently generated over a period of time. And then generally investors will look at a multiple depending on the sector. So steel could be 4 to 6 times or 4 to 7 times. A consumer products company can be 15 to 20 times. A healthcare company can be 10 to 15 times. Depending on the sector, a multiple is applied, and then they will figure out what the range of that asset. And then particularly those assets may have some advantage, whether they have access to their own mines, whether they have our port base and the logistics is much lower cost. There are certain aspects of those individual businesses that also can either increase or decrease the value of those businesses. So, I think that obviously if there are more than one person trying to bid for the assets, that obviously has a positive impact in terms of...
And we have seen that in many cases. In fact, most litigations have happened more because of the suitors rather than the promoters. Thankfully. But finally, A&M has been known for the turnaround stories. So instead of going for IBC or an asset sale, what about the turnaround of companies? How do you see that process building up in India while there are so many debt-laden companies?
So I see a great opportunity actually in the turnaround space going forward, because again, the turnaround really involves an operational turnaround of the business, which means going into the companies and working with the management and promoters of those companies to really drive revenue improvement, cost takeout, improvements in efficiency of how that asset is run, which have basically an impact of increasing operating cash flows, which usually will allow them to actually come out of the problem rather than and be able to service their obligations, or create enough investor interest so that somebody will come in and try and rescue them from that situation. So I think that it'll be a great opportunity going forward, as it has been so far for us.
All right, thanks Nikhil for joining us on CNBC TV 18. So that was the view coming in from A&M's Nikhil Shah. With that, we'll slip into a short breather on the show, but come back for more from Artha at ISB Hyderabad.